Play, Watch, Listen is a mostly games industry podcast featuring mostly game developers, and it is funded entirely by supporters on Patreon.
This is the start of the podcast. Hello, everyone. Nothing was said before this point.
It's happened before. It's fine. Happy Summer Games Fest, everybody. As said,
it's a magical time of the year
that we might cut. I told Rahul he could join today because I know that Mike Biffle and Austin Wintry are in fact fake gamers, and I assumed that they would not have seen all of the conferences.
I totally watched most of it. I think I most watched.
How can the composer of Journey and the creator of Thomas Was Alone be fake gamers?
Not real video games. You see, if they're indie, they're actually not real video
games. We went woke.
So...
We went woke. That's what it was. We went woke. And now we're not real.
Oh, what? Cubes have emotions now? Okay.
Yeah.
I thought a criteria of being a fake gamer was like the journalists who play on easy mode. I thought that's what that was.
That's like 20 discourses. It's like 500 discourses ago.
Okay.
My take recently has been that you're a fake gamer if all you ever do is complain about video games and you're not even playing them. Like, if you have strong opinions and you're angry about a video game that you're not even going to play, that's what I've decided of fake gamers.
I mean, that's a pretty legit definition as far as I'm concerned.
I'll tell you now, guys.
YouTubers talk shit about games they haven't played.
I have been asked to be on because I'm a real gamer, because I have voiced very many times over the last few years that I think female video game characters are getting ugly.
What is that? They've got jaws now. Have you seen? They've got the jaws. They got the jaws.
I thought about making a video where I've been on the internet for a minute. I've had every feature I have insulted. I've never been told I have a manly jaw. And I think if I took a photo of my face from that angle, I would look the exact same as Joanna Dark looks in that picture that they're all observing.
It's really telling how few of these people have been closer than 2 meters away to a woman's face. It really is.
The Peach Fuzz one for Horizon.
The Peach Fuzz one was ridiculous.
You all have facial hair.
Yeah. It's bless them.
But Mike, what did you watch and what did you think?
I think I watched most of it. I didn't see the wholesome one. But I saw like Day of the Devs, KOHLI's thing, Xbox, Ubisoft. I think those were the main ones, right?
Yeah.
PC and PC gaming as well. I saw that one. So I think I saw most of them, yeah.
You did.
I thought they were good. I think there were interesting trends, which I'm sure we could record a podcast about, and probably will. But yeah, I thought.
What are the trends you're?
Yeah, we could do that right now.
Oh my god, I have a podcast. I could just do this.
Yeah, I don't know if you realize what you're doing right now, or where you are, or who you're talking to.
Not just a Zoom call with your mates.
So Western AAA isn't shipping many games this year. That was the big one I noticed. Like, if you look at like KOHLI's one, a lot of Japanese developers, a lot of indie developers, not as heavy. Like, until Ubisoft, like, it was a bit of a like, where are the Western AAA studios right now? Like, that was coming out of the Summer Games Fest. That was the one that was surprising to me. Like, it was like you could see the dent in the release schedule that has kind of hit the Western.
Because
AAA
last year,
space.
Literally every game ever came out. So just given the development cycles of games of that scale, I guess it's
kind of a weird drought.
Everyone's fallen into very similar patterns, and I mean, I already knew that just by virtue of talking to people about it. That I suspect that next year and 2026 are going to be stacked. I actually suspect 2026 is going to be more stacked because people are so afraid to come out in line with GTA, which is funny because GTA always delays, so it's going to end up in 2026 as well. It's just going to be
It's the circle of life. It moves us all. And the circle of life is GTA's release schedule and everyone. It's going to be hilarious. For there's going to be just months of no games as a result of that.
You know what isn't afraid to come out in 2025?
What?
Doom, the Dark Age.
Oh, it looks fucking great, doesn't it?
Or was that 2025?
I thought it said 2025.
I don't actually remember.
Oh, yeah. I think it looked close. I can't wait for that. I love this generation of Doom. I got the soundtrack on vinyl the other day for the first.
Yeah.
For the 20. When was the first release? 2016, 2015.
2016, and then we had 2020 with Eternal.
It's beautiful. I love Doom.
Yeah, I mean, I know, but that's an interesting thing about it is that Dark Ages looks really good, and I think is clearly the same game, but it's such a taking it into a different era is such a good idea, because otherwise they're sort of limited on what they can really change. It's Doom, we know the formula.
It's kind of stealth Quake though, right? Like they're active. It's actually a Quake game, right? Like it's got that kind of Quake aesthetic. It looks like they're kind of leaning in that direction, which is super
Give me
clever.
more of that
very
anti-gravity
exciting.
gun. I loved that thing in Quake.
Yeah. Did you see the what everyone's talking about is a gun that grinds up a skull into small bone fragments and fires it out while you're holding a chainsaw wrapped in around a shield.
I love it. But this is the first time that we will have a Doom without Mick Gordon.
Oh yeah.
Did they say? I only saw their trailer, but did they say?
I didn't see anything. I think that's just fan stuff.
I actually haven't been able to figure out, even through my back channeling. I haven't pushed that hard, but it makes me realize I don't actually know who.
Did Mick say anything on Twitter or anything when it came out?
I don't think anyone has said anything.
I did look to
I'm
see
running
if
on
he had.
assumption.
Yeah, no. As far as I'm.
I mean, it is a great pairing. It really does feel like a Leone Morricone pairing between Gordon and Doom, but
They did. I know that they had gotten. They did that DLC that was called. What was it called? God's ancient God. Yeah. Something like that. Yeah, that because that was not Mick either.
I would assume it's probably the same dude who did the DLC, right? If they.
That's what one would guess, and I'm blanking who that was, but yeah, it's.
Austin, did you watch any of the conferences?
Yeah, I watched Microsoft and Ubisoft for the most. I've been a bit in and out of it, but a few definitely caught my eye. I was particularly interested in watching the Outlaws coverage, just as obviously
so good
as an endless sort of a permanent. No matter how much you burn me, I will somehow I just can't shake off Star Wars. Although the games don't really burn me very much, it's really
the games have been solid. And I say that with a professional reason to big up the Star Wars games, obviously, but it's true.
I said the other day that I feel like Star Wars games have been really, really good across the board, and then Rahul was like Warhammer, because I think both of those franchises are really, really solid in terms of video games. Recent Star Wars.
There's smart people on the licensing side on both of those. I know a few of the Warhammer guys, and obviously I work with the guys doing the Star Wars stuff. They're smart teams. They're finding good, interesting talent and me to kind of do these things and play with these kind of worlds. They're making. There's been a shift where I think I said this in interviews when we were talking about John Wick back in the day. The people in charge of licensing games now want to make the next GoldenEye. They get it. They want to make good stuff. So licensed games in general, I think, have just upticked in the last 3 or 4 years.
I only just played Avatar because of a friend's recommendation.
Fucking great.
I just ignored it, and it's solid. It's a good game.
Yeah.
Considering it's a licensed, I'm sure Dune will probably be the same, and because that was there as well.
Good. Yeah, I feel like I have to call out the exception of the Battlefront re-release. I think it's Battlefront 2 re-release, which did not launch with server support. And did you guys see all the stuff about mods being stolen?
No.
Oh, I didn't see that. Well, the mods in the
you're talking about the Battlefront remaster of Aspire.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I made a video about it, but it's crazy. Basically, a guy made mods for the original version of the game. Provably, that mod was taken by the dev team and put into the game. It has the same animations. It is the same thing. It was originally.
I think I remember saying, didn't the same thing happen with Deus Ex on GOG or something as well? I feel like something I don't want to cast aspersions. I'm probably remembering this wrong, but I remember there was another game that showed up with exactly the same thing, where the fan community mods basically ended up in the official way. Because the problem is I can see how it happens as well, because during development you use a bunch of placerholder stuff. You're kind of, we'll get this in and we'll swap it out for our own code later, and then you forget. Yeah, I can see how it happens. But it's not good. You get in a lot of trouble if you do that shit. So yeah,
it's not what this is supposed to be about. But they said, it ended up in the trailer by accident through placeholder. It won't happen again, and then it ended up in the game. That was where I think the bigger controversy came out. Was but you knew.
Isn't there an old controversy with Shadows of Mordor and assets with Assassin's Creed or something.
I think that might.
I think people were like, it's kind of knocking it off, right? But
Yeah.
I think people saw a similarity, but I don't think anyone said it was copied, did they?
I don't think that would be possible.
Sure, maybe I'm missing.
It's honestly amazing that kind of thing doesn't happen more frequently, because just given the sheer complexity of assets and how sometimes things can live in the game, even if they're not being actively, like they're kind of buried in the build, but they're not actually being called by any particular game.
Well, it's actually in contracts now as well. Like I have to sign contracts for most of the games we've put out with like publishers, which actively say you are not using any assets or anything that you didn't make and own, because it's caused so many problems over the years. That just like most of the contracts you sign now.
Like maps have accidentally been stolen from other games just because they just use someone else's map as a placeholder and just ended up in a
It can happen in Composer Land. This comes up. I'm sure you've seen there were videos, especially a few years ago, that went and made the rounds a bunch, about the pervasive use of temp music in film. And there was like that video about why do all the Marvel movies sound the same? And it was sort of the first time the general public, if you want to call it that, had heard about the concept of temp music. Temp music has been around for the entire history of film. And it's things editors have, from the start, used as a way to help shape the footage before composers often even hired. And obviously composers complain about it because they sit there and they live with existing music, and it kind of very narrows their sense of what the film needs. So they bring composers on to go, hey, can you basically just do this thing that we've sat here listening to every day for 4 months? Yeah. And so it's always a continuous kind of like thing with certain composers. But I've seen it a lot where I'm at conferences or whatever doing a panel with an audience of composers that are new to games, where they ask, how do you deal with temp music? And the answer is usually, actually, ironically, most game studios don't use it because first off, they tend to bring you in so early that you can just start providing it. So they're like, you just start writing stuff that becomes the placeholder and you iterate on it until it comes out. But there's this extra added version or added consideration that if they accidentally ship a game that has like a random track of, A New Hope in there that was supposed to be a placeholder, or like even if a Respawn Star Wars game that's a fully licensed use of the IP, we're like, oh, we're gonna slug this bit from A New Hope in or from Phantom Menace or whatever over this cinematic as just temp. The risk of accidentally shipping that is enough that they're like, we won't even temp it. It's
you
just
can't let it in. You can't let it in. Second.
Like, is it a licensing problem? What is the risk with using something that you already sort of own?
Because
nobody owns anything. That's the problem with music. Like, well, you could frame it as a problem if you're a game developer. You could frame it as an amazing outcome of one of the most concerted union efforts in creative history. But basically, music, I can't own. I cannot, without a lot of legal work, own a piece of music that I pay Austin to make for me. Like, ultimately there is. Say again, sorry?
Does that mean Austin owns it?
Austin is protected legally, basically. There are ways around that, and there are ways of like owning fully music, which often you do, because often, and obviously you pay for that. You pay for that full outright purchase, but like the default, no. Like if and especially like, I'll use John Wick as an example because that's a game I made a while ago now. Like the music from the movies of John Wick, me and Austin obviously did the soundtrack. Austin couldn't use the John Wick theme because that was, even though that was made for the movie, is on every DVD of John Wick that exists. The rights to that music still rightfully belong to the composer. So we have to do our own thing and take our own thing.
I highly doubt they belong to the composer, but usually the publishing of those are administered separately. So it's like if they're giving you, in the same way that like they might give you the John Wick IP, but they're not necessarily giving you a Keanu Reeves likeness.
Exactly.
You don't get. It's not like a binary. Do you have the IP, and therefore every subcomponent of the IP along with it. Music is often an outlier where they'll go, yeah, you can use the Star Wars thing, but you can't quote the John Williams.
Yeah.
I actually had this
music and actors, right? Like I can use them. If I've not done a Star Wars deal. I don't know the Star Wars deal, but I would make assumptions based on other experiences. I can buy the rights to use the Millennium Falcon, to have any droid I want. I can have the perfect likeness of C-3PO, but if I want Mark Hamill or I want the opening of the John Williams score, that's extra. And
I literally just went through this because I score Lego Fortnite for Epic, and they just recently did a May 4th Star Wars tie-in, and they created an in-world item where you can basically spawn the little Figrin Dan Cantina Band guy, and they were like, they said, can you do like, because last year when we launched the game, I developed a kind of aesthetic for what Lego Fortnite sounds like, and they said, can you do a cover in your Lego Fortnite aesthetic of the John Williams Cantina Band, but also wait, we have to like make sure we're cleared to use that piece of music, even though
they're like, you jizzled over this,
yeah, they were already cleared to be incorporating, Star Destroyers and all kinds of other Star Wars like officially licensed things. They did come back and say, yep, we're good to go, so have at it. But it also then had to go through an approval process separate from Epic at Lucasfilm in order to make sure that I wasn't sort of abusing their IP in my handling of that material.
The composer or Star Wars?
What'd you say?
Who is this? Who is this protecting? Who is it for?
All the above. Lucasfilm doesn't want anyone who owns an IP as valuable as Star Wars. If they're lending it out for someone to play with, wants to make sure that it still represents that.
Wouldn't that apply to everything, all the assets? Like, why is the Millennium Falcon different to the theme song?
Because music licensing has much more protections in place for ownership specifically, and as Austin says correctly, it's not the composer; it's the recording essentially. Usually, right? It's recording the publisher. You know more about this than me, Austin. I'm right? It's those
there's
aspects.
Royalties as well, right? Like for us and our likenesses and what they have to clear for us, like depending on what deal, because a lot of us don't sign off all of it. Like we retain certain protections.
I wish I got Cyberpunk royalties. God, can you imagine? I could probably retire.
I haven't had any video game royalties.
Yeah, no, they're fairly.
Has your likeness? Have you done your likeness for a performance? No.
I have.
That's where, like, as someone who's signed those contracts, that's where the money is. Do the license for sure. The license you'll get paid for in a lot of cases more than the actual recording.
Rahul may have.
Oh, okay.
Is that another beeped out?
Yeah, it's all beeped out. We're pull up.
Yeah, it's also, if you also think of it this way, music is very unique from most of the other component parts that go into media in terms of film, TV, etc. Because there's a whole separate music industry where these things can kind of live on their own. Like you can release albums, you can do concerts. There's all kinds of notions of rights and the administration of those rights. Whereas like there aren't the 3D model of the Millennium Falcon. There's not a Spotify equivalent to how to handle that part of the IP. So music has always operated separately, and it's almost like a Venn diagram, like concentric circles, or not concentric circles, but overlapping circles where there's places where they connect and where the contracts are very similar. But then you also, like for example, hold that thought, Mike, for 30 more
I have
seconds.
a play, watch, listen question for Austin that is
all right, great.
Peak play, watch, listen. Carry on. I'm ready.
What do you mean when you say that?
The guarantee of a buyout clause in most contracts, like a work for hire, is usually not actually an all-encompassing buyout, because standard practice is public performance or public exhibition will still generate you royalties that you share with the publisher, even if they own the copyright and you assigned it to them and it's part of their IP. So, for example, Sony owns Journey. They own the whole IP. They paid for it, and my contract was a standard video game work for hire, which meant that by copyright law, as I write it, it's mine. But then my contract says I now assign it to you. And so on paper, Sony is the author of Journey. But in a parallel lane from that is this notion of public performance royalties. So, for example, when the Royal Philharmonic did the BBC Proms a couple years ago at Albert Hall. That was a live performance of Journey's music. I actually got a royalty from that, and I got the exact same amount in royalty that Sony did, because they get the what's called the publisher half, and I get the writer's half. And so even though I don't own it, there is still another avenue.
It's almost considered your performance just being replicated, so you're always being paid for your voice.
He's paid as the author of the music rather than the performance, right? The performance is being done obviously by the people.
Right. No, I just meant the public side of it, as in any time Austin notes that what he's written, it's almost treated as if Austin himself is singing it.
I hear what you're saying. Yeah.
Oh,
royalty.
It's actually about it's what the way Mike framed it is actually the more accurate. It is about the authorship of the piece than it is because the dichotomy between author and performer is where all this comes from. 100-ish years ago, a bunch of
I'm going to jump in with my question here.
All right.
Because this is the thing. So, am I right in assuming, and I think you're about to answer my question, which is why I have to jump in with it before you answer it.
Just pretend.
But it spins off into a thing. No. So, obviously, me being me, I like to think that these are hard-won rights by the workers via group action or whatever. Is it actually just a side effect of the fact that for the longest time you could buy music without actually that being an audio? The sheet music predates the record, so therefore the law was built around the sheet music, and then the record was added as a supplemental. Is that why that's the case? And if it is, do you think this would be different if somehow the concept of buying music had happened simultaneous to the recording? Would it be more like voice acting? Like, would it be because if you think about it, like Rahul giving a performance, there is a writer who has written words, an actor who has performed it. And, if that script was to be performed with a different cast later, turned into a stage show or whatever, they would go back to the writer and pay. Is this idea that, Austin, you are both writer and performer, is that rooted in that reality from the past? And if we were in a situation where that was reappraised, would you just be more of the work-for-hire performer? I guess that was a weird way of coming back to it. Or is it just that they're just such different jobs?
When it comes to... Yeah, I get what you're asking. It is largely the kind of second scenario. It actually wasn't a labor dispute. There are, at least in the case of America, there are exceptions. For example, if I understand correctly, I'm not an expert in German copyright law, but for example, in Germany,
Austin.
I know. I'm sorry.
You're fake German music expert.
I'll take it from here, Austin.
Please, Herr Professor. The performance rights societies in the U.S. There's sort of three main ones: ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC. There's every rest of the countries in the world have one each. It's sort of nationally set. PRS in London or in the UK, and in Germany it's called GEMA. And GEMA is actually a trade union as well for composers and musicians, so it does a dual purpose. And what that means is, my understanding is, if a German production hires a German composer, they legally can't withhold royalties. Like if I'm making a movie, you would get royalties on like my DVD sales as a composer by law in Germany, because it's a labor fight that was won at some point and established that as a minimum. Of course, what that means in practice is I get a lot of emails from German composers who are like, German productions hire German composers as rarely as possible because it obligates them to a bunch of back-end income that they wouldn't have to pay if they hired a foreigner. That's unique to Germany, though, because ASCAP and BMI and CSAC in the U.S. are not unions at all. They are what's called public performance organizations, and I'm a member of ASCAP. They are all roughly similar, though. BMI recently switched to being a for-profit entity. That historically both ASCAP and BMI were both nonprofits, and then BMI decided they would switch their strategy. The gambit they're making to their members is by giving ourselves a stronger profit incentive, we will boost your ultimate earnings because we want to make more money too.
That's why the trains run better thanks to privatisation on Margaret Thatcher. Absolutely. No, it's good.
Shout out to
The
Maggie.
profit motive improves services. We know this.
Well, you're not going to find much argument
Competition.
from me on the general premise of that concept. Not all industries are created equally, but ASCAP, interestingly, is a nonprofit, and they write something, I can't remember the numbers, but it's over $1 billion in royalties they give to their members every year. And so that started, though, to actually answer your question with despite all these random tangents, was that composers 100 years ago, like you think of the Tin Pan Alley, New York composers who would write music and sell the sheet music, you would get these composers who write what turns out to be a hit song, and a performer would sell out night after night at a theater performing that composer's music, and they would have only made the one sale of the sheet music one time. And at some point they were like, shouldn't I be in on this action given that they're selling out theaters by playing my music? And so the deal that was made was that the venue has to pay a license. And the venue then says, here's all the music that was, like, they play an annual license, and then they go, here are all the pieces that your members, here's all the pieces belonging to your members that were performed in this venue. And so it's like, if you're George Gershwin writing, what we would now call standards, they'd go, oh, we saw that this, we owe you this much as paid by the venue. So the performer is not paying that. This is one of those things that throws a lot of game publishers and game developers off, because they're like, well, what does it cost to take those rights away from you? And it's like, but why do you want them? Because it doesn't cost you anything. The idea is, if Sony hires me to do Journey, and I retain my writer's share, Sony will never pay into a fund unless Sony decides to create a TV network or something that is a public exhibition, because that's the modern equivalent of the concert venue.
So the Hollywood Bowl would be paying you.
Absolutely, yeah, probably very well, because it's also weighted by how big a venue, how many people were in the audience, in the same way that television royalties, because once radio and TV became the main place people consume media, ASCAP and BMI and all them were like, that's the new venue. So you're like by far the wealthiest composers in the world are the Jonathan Wolff, for example, like the composer of Seinfeld, because primetime network television, eternal syndication is worth, it's public exhibition of that music over and over and over, and in like the most valuable time slots. And so it's
why if you watch The Sopranos now, the music in The Sopranos is completely different now than when it aired, because they...
Is it really?
Yeah, in syndication they rescored, because the original Sopranos used a bunch of like license. If you buy a DVD or whatever, it'll be what it was. But if you watch it like on TV, yeah, they've scored a lot of that. Not the soundtrack, but the license, the pop songs that were in Sopranos.
That's probably for a different reason. Probably what that means is that whatever band or like Sinatra type artist or whoever gave them a limited use license that was basically like, you can air it on TV this way, and it expired, and then they're like, oh, now that we're in a different
we accidentally made a show that people were going to watch for all of eternity. What have we done? We fucked this up.
Well, bringing it back to games, it's kind of a shame. Like,
that's what we thought of Summer Game Fest. To be clear, before you start, that was mine and Austin's view of Summer Game Fest. What we just said. That was what it was.
When you play something like Grand Theft Auto, Vice City now, or San Andreas and stuff, the music's been halved by
That's it.
Yeah. The like Billie Jean's the opening track to Vice City. Gone. That's not. It's been patched out. If you play the old, I think it's patched out if you have the digital.
Wasn't Alan Wake famously like pulled from stores because of a music licensing?
It went off of Steam for music, a license that expired, and these are all things. I see these as growth pains of just the game industry. The game industry is young enough already, but the whole notion of not obviously live ops is not the right way to describe a game like Alan Wake, but the idea of a store where theoretically, tech notwithstanding, you can patch a game for eternity after its release. So like, obviously that's not
true. And sell a
practice.
Game forever. That's the big one. Sell a game forever. Like, and this is hit with license games, because when you used to make a licensed game for a disc, you'd buy the rights to sell games based on License X for 2 years, and then you'd sell all your discs and you'd be moved on and you wouldn't give a crap. Nowadays, licensing deals have time limits on them. And it's fascinating. It's been fascinating as someone who's done a couple of licensed games, like seeing the contracts evolve. Where now we're talking about like, well, what happens after this runs out in a way that didn't used to happen because So there's actually discussion of how that timeline works out and how do we as an industry let our games survive the inevitable complexities of a theoretically infinite time of licensed
I think that's shown up
game
in a
release.
bunch. As always, there was a bunch of criticism that the Xbox showcase didn't have enough release dates. Which, especially now that we have digital-only consoles and so many people are buying their games digitally, I feel like there's more flexibility than ever with release dates. Like it makes
But also,
less
haven't
sense
we
now.
learned?
I totally agree. Haven't learned nothing. It's crazy. But rebuttal
you
I got
don't
to someone,
want them to say a release date until
Unless
it's
they're
fucking
ready.
the day of.
Did Cyberpunk mean nothing? I said that to someone. I was like, why would you want that? And the rebuttal was something along the lines of like, if I'm a customer, then they owe me the roadmap of things that I should be expecting over the next few years.
But then also don't cry when everyone's up in arms or it's crunched and then there's no winning around any scenario other than not giving a date.
Give a date. And
it's also about when you announce it, right? Like one of the things that was interesting to me about Xbox, and this was different to Sony, Xbox were like talking about games that were well out, right? They were talking about stuff that was years away from release in a way that when you the trend I think in general is to shorten that window because it makes it more predictable. If you know this, if you're 6 months out from release, you feel pretty confident that you know when the game's actually going to be done. It can still go wrong, but you've got a good sense of it. Whereas in the past, it would be like 2 years out, and you'd throw a date on it, but it was absolutely guesswork. You don't know how long it's going to take.
Xbox had a choice. The showcase for them this year was PR, in that they had to basically give everybody a list of the greatest hits. I'm sure Gears of War is forever away, right? But they had to give people by the way, we still make great games after having laid off shut down 3 or 4 studios after the failure of Redfall. Like, they kind of had to be like, here's stuff you love to make people excited.
Let's point to the future.
There was a leak.
It's like, if that is in fact their calculation, it seems like they were successful. It
was very positive. It showed a lot of good stuff.
I really liked it.
There was a leak today, which I don't know if you want to mention, but it made the news. It was on IGN front page that GameStop have accidentally leaked the release date for Metal Gear Solid Triangle Snake Eater, and it's way soon because they didn't have. Did they have anything on that? That was on the Xbox.
I don't remember. That said, like, I worked there, and those systems were wrong all the time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, they were right sometimes, but wrong.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because they put it into like almost basically full. Like, it's not.
I mean, it's a little different to remake, but the one thing that always gets me about, like, again, I think Xbox this time showed things that are very far away because they needed to show things and get people excited about them. That is what this showcase was for, and I totally think it succeeded. You remember when they did the one that was, they were only showing games that were out in the next 12 months? That was 2 years ago. Hollow Knight is still not out. That was 2 years ago that they showed Silksong. We haven't heard from it since, and it was in the coming out in the next 12 months. It's like, you could just be so wrong. And it's a really tough situation, like video games top to bottom, that I think I feel like Phil Spencer keeps walking himself into, is like, people will say they were lied to. You weren't lied to. Someone was just wrong. People can still be wrong without there being malicious intent assigned to their incorrectness. Like, if Xbox changed his strategy, he didn't lie to you. He was just, or something changed, or he was wrong.
Yeah.
Journey was something like 3x over schedule. It was supposed to take like a year, and it took 3. It might have.
But it was a green team as well, right? Like, it was a team that hadn't really made.
They made.
You shipped a couple. Sorry, apologies. I was getting my order. I was thinking
it was definitely their biggest, and like each game was more complicated. But it's one of those where.
But still,
Journey took 3 times longer to make than initially anticipated, and it was their third, like, Sony, first party. Obviously, they're not owned by Sony, but you know what I mean by it. Like, it was made as an exclusive PS3 title. So theoretically, all the complications of cross-platform and all that, they don't have to worry about. It still was super hard to nail down, and that's a game that's relatively less complicated. I mean, it was hyper concentrated, so it wasn't actually probably that much less complicated, because it was one of those games where every frame mattered more than than like a 60-hour
Complications
game
and something
because the
being
whole idea,
hyper-specific.
hyper distilled, hyper focused. But still, point being, like some sprawlingly massive open world game with 1,000 mechanics and systems, and it's just gonna take longer than you think. It's just amazing to me that we're still like, it feels like a self-inflicted wound
Totally.
to go. It's gonna be out. We're pretty sure we can have it out by then, and I understand the pressures, and I understand that, there's a lot of good reasons to try to push that. But yeah, I'm a fan of.
I get it from the publisher's perspective. The publishers are just being like, hey, we need to sell hardware. We need to sell the service to make people think there's a game to play. And I think that messaging is the reason why those customers feel entitled to that information. It's like coming from the same place as the publisher. For the dev teams, it's a self-inflicted wound 100% of the time. Why I don't know why you'd ever want a studio to announce a release date for a game before they're ready to do it. I just can't see. I don't feel like.
I mean, it's for a lot of the same reasons. Like from a company point of view, especially if you're a big developer, for sure. I mean, if you're trading on the stock market, then you need to be showing that there's going to be profit coming in at a certain date.
EA doesn't have a
That's
choice,
the big
right?
thing. But even honestly, on a small developer point of view, you've got to make sure that people know you're still alive and you're still kicking and you're actually launching stuff. Like, there's definitely we're in stealth mode right now, and there's certainly a time limit on how long we would be able to stay in stealth mode before people just assumed that something had gone very, very wrong. So, there's a lot of those kind of political reasons to make sure you're announcing stuff. Yeah. Stay in the conversation, stay investable, stay whatever.
Yeah.
And if I don't think there's anything remotely unreasonable about being held accountable if you are surviving on someone else's money. If a publisher has said, we're going to give you 10, 5, 10, 15, 100, however many $1 million to sustain a studio of whatever size, if you're just like, now leave us alone and go.
Oh, yeah. You have to tell the publisher. You should have to tell the public.
Yeah.
You're talking about I think Alana's talking about publicly saying the release date. There's always a release date privately. There's a release date from the moment you sign the contract privately.
Yeah, I'm just hoping that it is in fact true that there's a general trend industry-wide. I think there's a trend industry-wide. I mean, a trend on behalf of the players that actually pay attention to this stuff, that tune into a Summer Game Fest and get excited about this stuff, or the people that actually watch the Game Awards for the trailers, that kind of thing, that type of player. My hope is that there's this gradual realignment in the direction of it's cool to know that it's coming, and that's all I need for now. Or maybe even it's all I know for sure is it's not this year. Or that kind of thing. And just because I think some of it, the only reason people get upset is, I would seemingly argue, is when you set an expectation that you don't live up to. And if we get out of the habit, it seems people are actually increasingly.
I think it's a habit. I want it to be like films. I really wish we could just announce when we start, because it would help so much with recruitment,
the film industry,
and understanding of the industry. Yeah, the film industry.
We have access to shit all the time.
I appreciate it has its issues in the film industry, but I would love it if we could if we'd been able to announce when we started Tron Identity, if we'd been able to publicly say we're working on Tron, and before we started recruiting, we would have had everyone who'd ever dreamt of working on Tron applying for those jobs, right? We'd have had access, and we got great people, don't get me wrong, but we would have gotten a different kind of fan, we'd have gotten different kinds of people. It would have been really interesting.
That's actually...
Or get them sooner, yeah. We would have had to look less hard for those people, yeah.
That's actually a really interesting difference I never considered, is that when games are announced, they have to visually do something and it has to be timed with this window. But a movie can say, hey, Deadpool and Wolverine is in production, Hugh Jackman's been cast, okay, cool. And then the trailer is still the most watched, it still hits when it hits.
And they get to say, oh, we had to push back by 6 months, and everyone's like, huh. No one gives a shit when a movie.
We're planning on making a Fantastic Four movie 5 years from now. Please debate and discuss the casting for 7 years. But I'm sorry, too soon.
It actually feels.
They just said we're working on it.
Oh yeah, Elder Scrolls. What was that? That was 3 years ago, 4 years.
Yeah,
and they were like, "It's coming." Of course it is. But
if you're a filmmaker or someone who works in the film industry who's always wanted to work on Elder Scrolls, you're sending the begging email immediately when you see that announcement, and that's the. I think that would be good for everyone. I think it'd be great for everyone. Theoretically, but then I know there's arguments against it for sure, and it would require everyone to do it at the exact same moment, which obviously the games industry will never do.
This is speculative.
Unless we bring it up in the secret conspiracy meetings.
Do you think E3 played into that, like the stage demo, the crowd announcement. Like, we didn't do that for film.
How are you so loud?
I think it's
crazy. I'm trying to move the microphone away from
I'm a
you.
theatre actor.
He's projecting. He's
What's
using
more
his
to the
stage
breach?
voice.
Okay, I just got to turn the volume down a little. Sorry, Jack.
So my answer is because it's yes, the E3 thing, but I think they're both the same. I think they're both the result of the same root cause, which is video games are products, and that's fundamentally where we came from. We were tech products. Those E3 was a tech product show, not a showcase for artistic mediums. And we have had this weird switch that's happened. Like, if you go back, I saw there was someone compiled like a summary of all of the Spike Awards over history. And you go back to like what the Spike Awards were initially for games versus what happened when KOHLI came in and how they evolved and blah, blah, blah. Like, just culturally, we have moved from we sell video games the way you would sell a car to we sell video games the way you would sell a movie. And we have this vestigial thing. And then it impacts everything about how games are made. It impacts the fact that video games are largely worked on by full-time teams and employees working at companies. And then you look at movies and it's much more about freelancers and contractors 100%. And people coming together for a project. All of that stuff is because video games started as a product, as software, as a completely different kind of thing. We've evolved because we're so fucking good into art. But we are still making things in the way you would make a piece of spreadsheet software.
All those, it actually, what you're saying goes full circle to the whole music rights conversation from before, because often when I'm explaining to people, like I have a lot of composer friends that do pretty much only film and TV, and whenever they give me a call to ask about games and what are the kind of businessy contract type differences between the industries, I give a little mini history lesson like what you just said. I always say the fact that we're an offshoot of a very corporately structured tech industry that spun off into a creative industry, but we still have all the vestigial organs of our heritage, namely that belief that when you work for the company owns what you make. That's like a hand-me-down. Hollywood doesn't automatically have that because everything is built so strike force, one-off. It's like if your movie is called Rahul's Blue Shirt, it's Rahul Blue Shirt LLC is like that's the company name that was made for that, and then as soon as the movie's done, that company disappears forever. Those bank accounts close. Like, game industry is not built like that, and so the all the kind of ownership discussion that naturally entails follows suit, kind of follows the predetermined path of just where it comes from.
I'm not comfortable with you leaking my LLC company. Can we bleep that?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
I thought Blue Shirt's first few releases were great, but I think it's gone downhill since then. It's interesting though, Austin, because there is this kind of chicken and the egg situation which we're seeing now, where you kind of have the money people of the games industry would kind of quite like to not have the responsibility of fully employing teams and companies in that way. But you also have the workers who are going, well, maybe we should unionize. And there's kind of this interesting thing where both parties are kind of incentivizing the other to an extent, in a way that's, we may end up with the film industry, like we may end up in a very kind of that kind of style. There are people in the film industry who would rather work in an industry like ours. I don't know. It's too big a question probably to get into on this Summer Games Fest summary podcast.
I can also say that from my point of view, as someone who is a freelancer regardless, it's like it wouldn't really change things for me particularly.
No, you're a Ronin. You walk the grassy fields alone with your sword, and by the way, fucking.
And I feel like there are probably a lot of composers who do not get as much work as you do, who would love to have full-time employment.
Very few composers are on staff. Like even like the smaller composers.
But he's
it's honestly. It's actually 99% of games don't have enough music work to justify a salaried position, even if they wanted someone.
Yeah.
So you do occasionally have like a David Garcia with Ninja Theory, the Hellblade folks, where he is the staff audio director. So he's writing the music, but he's also sound designing, and like Darren Korb, Supergiant, same thing. Darren's implementing everything, sound designing everything, writing all the music. there are a few of those, but they're pretty rare. There
a
are
lot of indie games who make their own music that's also the writer or whatever else. Like it is.
that
they
happens
just do multiple
sometimes.
jobs.
There's rarely, like, if I think of the companies that have hired me in an ongoing, recurring way, like Stoic, the creators of the Banner Saga, they hired me when they were still doing their Kickstarter campaign for the original Banner Saga, and I've done everything that they've done since then. And so I've been in continuous contact and collaboration with them for 12 years straight.
May as well
but
be
at no
employee
point,
light.
What?
You may as well be employee light, like you're employee.
Well, I'm employee in spirit, but I'm also not doing 40 hours a week of Stoic work. Like, there's waves where, like, we ship a game, like Banner Saga 2 comes out. There's like a good few months where they're spooling up Banner Saga 3. We're doing marketing, whatever, where I'm barely even, like, we check in, we say hi, we get dinner when we're in the same city, like at DICE, that kind of thing. But I'm not really actually working on Banner Saga 3 yet. Yeah.
You're in a polycule with them. You're kind of exploring other options as well,
That's
which is the
pretty
benefit
common.
of. Well, yeah, but that's what's really cool to me about all the kind of the recurrent freelancers I work with. Like, it's so cool because they just go off and make other things and learn how to do things and come back. I'm working with the same sound engineer who's worked on all of our games. And it's been a little while since we've worked together, and he went and worked on some different projects and has learned completely different pipelines and processes. So now working again with him is like, oh, this is different. You've gone and learned some cool shit over there.
Yeah.
And it's,
That's the thing.
There's definitely benefits to it for sure, 100% for both parties. Yeah.
Plus, I like, there's a project I'm working on right now that's not announced yet that I'm excited about, that I have no clue when it will be ready to
announce it, Austin. Here, announce it.
And a date.
And
A date, a date. Tell us the date. Don't lie to us.
That one is pretty Hollywood-esque in its structure. I'm pretty sure every single member of the development team is an independent contractor freelancer, and that there are no staff positions. Because when I look at the Slack channel, I'll see member of the art team that goes, hey, I have another gig. I'll be out for the next 3 weeks. Then I'll be back, and we'll keep going from there. And there's a certain, they're like, cool, see you then. And it's like, it's all baked into the rhythm of the structure of like, we just need to hit certain deliverables. Yeah. But however you get there, however you hit those deliverables, the independence you get by being a freelancer means.
Yeah. How do you feel about that?
It's how we did Volume. Volume was done that way for 3 years. We did it on Volume. There was two. It was myself and my business partner, I think, were the only full-time employees on that project for its duration. You just have to be very flexible because the guy can get another gig for 3 weeks. So you obviously, if you need to hit your targets with that guy, you need to be flexible enough in your schedule to kind of accommodate that. Well, but other than that, it was quite cool.
But
I quite liked it.
I think the schedule, like the way it's done with me, in 99% of cases, is July 1st, we need XYZ music deliverables. How I apportion my time prior to July 1st, they do not police that. So if I chip away at it throughout June and then send things and then it's good. And if June 30th, I'm like, here's everything. As long as I hit July 1st, they don't really care.
I think we're going to see more jobs working that way in the future. And I should say, I think for me, because I've definitely ended up kind of going that way and then coming back to the full-time thing. So I've got a team of 20 people now who are all full-time. I like that primarily because of the consistency of the people, because you get to actually learn and grow together in a way. What you've got with your relationships, Austin, is amazing, and I think it's probably comparable to this, but that kind of sense of growing together and this team just knowing very well how to work together and then crossing over onto multiple projects, you're like, you've come together, you're the 10th episode of Band of Brothers, right? You're our team and you know how to fucking get this shit done.
Well,
there's a power to that that's really exciting.
My whole job would fall apart. If I take 2 weeks off a year, right? Like in the US you get 10 days off a year. Even taking that week off, I tell them 3-4 months in advance that this is when I'm going to take a week off to spend time with my family. And I have to repeatedly remind people a month in advance to tell them that I'll be out for a week. and we have to prepare for it. Like it's,
it depends how much your job relies on constant collaboration, right? Like there are definitely jobs that can work better as satellites versus.
Yeah, if someone doesn't like come in and pick up the things that I would be working on, like it could like cause a delay. Like it, there's just no way that we could do that. I think that's probably pretty AAA wide, but I guess also specific to working in a very narrative heavy studio is a lot of trouble if you lose a writer.
The Epic, and there's other companies that do this, will have like a high school style summer break where the entire company shuts down to prevent exactly this problem.
We get 3 days off in August. The whole of Sony SIE all get 3 days off in August, which is like super nice. They give us all just a little break in August.
Yeah,
animation studios do it. Kerry's team do like I think it's 2 weeks every summer. They just shut down the studio because with animation, especially stop motion, which is what she works in, obviously everything's about like, you know, they make a puppet, they make a set, they put the puppet on the set with an animator. If anyone in that chain disappears, you've got physical, RAHUL, literal problems.
Your job is when you're at the point of production, if someone's not there, like, it's so much money. Like, if someone doesn't show, if an actor's sick and can't show up to set, that can cost like hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, or like a DP or somebody. Yeah, it's
totally. Like, if someone is unwell, it's just the cost of you not being available.
Well, Midnight Mass for us was a great example of it because that was the first show basically to test out the guidelines for the government for COVID and SAT.
Right.
And it was made abundantly clear that to even a certain degree, Flanagan, if he got COVID, we could still figure things out with a remote van.
Oh yeah, didn't he have like a cold?
He did. He had a head cold during.
So he was just hiding.
A busy week for me.
During
it was my monologue. Yeah, and so I was never direct. I was directed by walkie-talkie from a remote van.
That's so funny.
Because the head cold couldn't be because it was it was pre-vaccine and they didn't know what it could be.
Yeah.
But watching how they treated, because they were like, well, we can weather this, we can bring in a new we got this, but if the face performance goes, hundreds and hundreds of thousands every
in a day.
It's just like, it kills us. So it's weird as well, because they put that pressure on you. Like, I'm never ill. I'm always cool. And then I feel like as soon as I say yes to a production, I start, ooh. It's like the pressure.
It's me 2 days before any business trip. Without fail, I will feel sick.
Rahul recently shot something very cool, but had a toothache.
Oh my god!
And
Atlanta, yeah.
You got there and you had like maybe 3 days to figure out if you'd be able to act. And it mattered so much what happened in those 3 days. Like, you immediately went to a dentist because, they say, like, the show never stops for acting. It's like, it really does apply. Where the act, you have to fucking show up, or they'll send someone to your house and be like, really? How sick are you, though?
Yeah, I was terrified. I basically, a real big opportunity to work with some very famous people, and it was this awesome opportunity. I landed in Atlanta, and I remember, as the plane touched down, I remember being like... And I grabbed some Advil at the hotel, and by the next day I was on my hands and knees, just in absolute agony. It was an abscess.
Oh yeah.
From a fracture.
Those British teeth,
Yeah, good old British teeth.
Fracture, like gritting your teeth or something, or.
Yeah, and negligence. I mean, there was a time when I was in my 20s, like I just couldn't afford to really get things done, and they just got exacerbated. And then I got busy, and then
he's British.
I always found that
the genetics.
There was never a good time to have my mouth be out of commission. I was always like, well, I've got this VO thing, and then
I think there's probably some good times for your mouth to be out of commission, Rahul, if I'm honest.
I'm 100%. I'm 100% clipping that little one sentence soliloquy.
But so, I would always put it off because I was like, well, I could go and get this extracted, but I know in next week is that thing, or it's that. So it just it got to, so there I am in Atlanta. Literally on my hands and knees in the dark, holding onto my jaw and my ear. Oh. I drove myself at 3 a.m. to the ER room, just the most local one I could find. They gave me antibiotics and painkillers, and my shoot day was Tuesday, and this was now Saturday, Sunday before I could pick up the prescription. And I just was like, do not rip the cord. Don't tell the ADs.
Yeah.
Something. I was just this extra added fear because I was like, I'm filming them. there's nothing I can do. I'm in the scene. They're not going to replace me. And it's the one thing I think, like, my industry will forgive things it shouldn't and behaviors it shouldn't, but it will never forgive not showing up on time. That's it. You want to get blacklisted? Miss your call time, don't show up. You're done. But, you know, shout, scream, smack an AD about. He's an artist.
Yeah. But it didn't cost $100,000. It's fine. It's such a, like, I guess, you know, upside of my job is if I'm sick, or even like when I've been dealing with family stuff, I opt to still work. I work through COVID every time I've had it, because otherwise I'm fucking bored. So I'm like, it's better for me to be able to work and have stuff to do while I'm sick and miserable than to not do anything. But like, if you're an actor and you're in a ton of pain, how are you supposed to even perform? And like, there was a scene in Bly Manor.
You probably don't know this, but when Viggo Mortensen kicked the helmet,
what happened?
Yeah,
What?
Continue.
Know, right? Shocking, right?
No. In Bly Manor, where somebody had lost a family member
Jesus
day,
Christ.
and just had to act through it, and I was like, I don't. In Bly Manor, I don't want to detail any of what happened, but I just, and when I watch that scene, I'm always like, fuck.
A co-star had a bereavement, like an immediate family bereavement.
Yeah.
There and then. I got the phone call while we were abroad.
You just have to go through it.
And they shot out the day between takes crying.
Fuck.
And no one knows either. Like, they did such a good job, you'd never guess, but like, when watching that scene, I feel like I always
it really evokes, because you're watching someone like,
pretend,
you know what's happening, and you know it was, it
doesn't matter.
But that's what we're like compensated for, because we are compensated.
Oh yeah,
you know, we are paid
for
well,
sure.
particularly series regulars, right?
I was gonna say, couldn't this also be a thing in like construction work? If one person
or working in a shop, right? Like, it's being in a physical location.
Well, some jobs are intrinsically way more substitutable. If you need someone to come in and take over,
there are probably more trades.
The problem with ours is once you've been seen on camera and you've shot, you are now irreplaceable.
Yeah.
There are no understudies, right?
Yeah.
You're absolutely
so,
right.
Once you shot day one, they're committed. But like what I'm experiencing right now is I'm replacing someone.
Yeah.
But he hasn't shot.
Doesn't matter.
So but they know they should. My first day of filming is Thursday. I only met with them yesterday. They know in their hearts that the guy's first scene, which was originally scheduled for Thursday, should shift. But they do not want to deal with the cost of that. They'd rather me just sort of like go unprepared, deer in headlights, and I'll figure out and make the transition smooth than them take any...
Yeah.
It is what it is, right?
I mean, like when I worked at IGN, when I had pneumonia and I had to take a week off, they just had someone else do the shit that I would be doing, and it wasn't hard. Like I said, at my current job, without any prep, that's really difficult. There are people like who are way more important than me. That if we lose somebody for a week because they're sick, and there are things we can't get approval on, and there's like a bottleneck, again, that's terrible. Like,
I mean, it's a massive deal at my scale as well, because I've got like on 20 people. Like, there's one person in charge of an entire chunk of what the game is, right? A coder who is responsible for X mechanic, and if that person's out of action for a week, that you are fixing the problems caused by that for like a month after. Yeah,
and I wonder if
it's a
thing that we had
building buffers
with all the COVID delays. Everyone chalked it up to communication. But what if just having a bunch of people get sick? And COVID sickness, like, I've had it twice. The second time, I was fucking useless. Like, I kept waking up because I was wearing my Apple Watch, and it was waking me up, giving me the heart rate warning because I was 125 BPM while I was asleep. Like, and I was sweaty. Jesus. I couldn't remember anything. And I think I actually, again, didn't take any time off work, but it was fucking awful. But, like, the amount of people who would take time off work for that during that period of time, or like who lost family members, or were just super stressed, like, it's entirely possible that we hadn't considered just the human factor of losing people for weeks on end when it came to all of those COVID delays, because that's a huge thing. Like, there's AAA studios, I mean, now more than ever, unfortunately, but there's just no fucking fat on them. Like, I mean,
people don't. I think if you've not worked, I'm sure a lot of people who listen to this who aren't in games work in like complex interactions and dependencies, but like, it's the dependencies that have more of an effect on schedule and budget than the work itself.
Yeah.
It's the reason, when I'm thinking, like, when I'm trying to get to a milestone or a release date, yes, it's important that like it takes 2 days to do this task and I've got this many tasks, but it's much more important of like, well, this 2-day task needs to be done so that these 10 days worth of work can be done by other people which are waiting on that. And then this person actually has another responsibility. Those dependency chains, it really is like it's a row of dominoes. Like if one goes over, then you're dealing with the fallout of like, yes, that person was only going to do a week's work, but that week of work is what unlocked 3 months of work for 5 people. So now we have to deal with that not being in place. So it's a whole, I've got a project manager who basically their only job is to just stay on top of the dependencies, ultimately. Like, that's ultimately the primary focus of what they're doing. Because if that gets dropped, I had to do a job that took me about 2 hours, but I had to do it now because it's going to cause months of work for other people, you know.
A lot of what our producers do, just make sure dependencies,
Yep.
I will add one additional comment, and then I got to run. To your something you said a few minutes ago, Mike.
Can I have two? Add your additional comment, and then give me one thing you really like from Summer Game Fest, so I can pretend we talked about Summer Game Fest.
So we put it in the thumbnail, yeah.
I can do branding. That. Yeah, that's easy. Just the real quick sort of epilogue on your comment about the internal team culture that you're able to build when it is a bunch of actual employees that are seeing. I will say that one of the very first things I say to any new team is, can you please add me to all your Slack channels? Can you like treat me like I am a member of the core team? Because they won't default to. And I definitely am keenly aware of how out of the loop I am when I'm not. So it is an absolute weakness of being a freelancer that I do double and triple time to overcome. And I get in on sprint reviews and I watch the art department show the latest this and the programmers talk about this and that, because I like to be a part of the team. It's a lot extra work on my part, but to me, it's what doing a game is all about. I love seeing all that come together, and it's not a given. So I just wanted to throw in there, you're absolutely right. There are massive kind of cultural team cohesion type advantages to that structure that have to be conscientiously overcome in a freelancer structure. And so just basically reaffirming that. And then my favorite thing from Summer Games Fest is my very first ever GDC almost 20 years ago. I met a composer named Will Roger. It was both of our first GDCs, and I remember we both did the thing they called the Demo Derby, which is like a panel of industry veterans who judge your portfolio in front of a room full of fellow young composers. It's sort of like the American Idol auditions, where it's sort of like a lot of, you play your 20 seconds of music and experienced audio directors are kind of like, you really need to work on X, Y, or Z. It was my first time to GDC. I was new to the industry. I entered the Demo Derby, and there was this other guy who entered. There were a bunch of people that day, obviously, but I remember hearing his computer demos, his mock-ups, and being like, that's the most realistic fake orchestra I've ever heard. It blew me away. And it's been really fun watching his just continued escalating success over the years. He worked on like Mortal Kombat 11, when Call of Duty franchise went back to World War II a few years ago with just like Call of Duty World War II. He did that. But he's had an unbelievable year. It's been the year of Will, because in addition to scoring Helldivers 2 and a kind of interesting indie called Pacific Drive, he also is the lead composer among several on the new Star Wars Outlaws. And it was cool, as part of the UB Forward thing, they did like a live orchestral performance of bits of his music, wrapped into the general presentation. I got a text the other day that was like, hey, I'm at a coffee, because he doesn't live in LA. And I got a text like, hey, I'm at a coffee shop near you. I unfortunately was out. But I was like, what are you doing in town? He was like, we're doing an orchestra thing as part of the Ubisoft conference. And I thought, wow, that's awesome. I had no idea. So anyway, I just love seeing great success befall fantastic, deserving people. And this is the year of Will Roger. Holy shit. And so anyway, that was my favorite part by far.
I'll take it. Michael, was yours? Did you have a highlight?
Weirdly, annoyingly, Austin has walked all over mine because another composer on that game is John Everest, who is an alumni, did the soundtrack for Solitaire Conspiracy for us, someone who I've loved for a long time. So that was really cool, and hearing from him a few months ago that he was doing Star Wars, I was so hyped for him. I'm glad that's out. So it's basically the same as Austin's. I'll throw in though, I'm excited for Assassin's Creed. Like, that looked fucking hot. It looked like what I've wanted Assassin's Creed to be for a little while. I'm excited for that one.
I do think we're in an interesting predicament where, like you said, there's a trend of not a lot of Western game releases. I think we also have an issue of a trend where everyone's making a Sekiro. There are so many games that look like Sekiro that, like, even Assassin's Creed, obviously we know Assassin's Creed is not Sekiro.
I think didn't you say this when I was raving about Shogun a couple of months ago? You were like, wait for it because you're about to get hit by like a billion.
Which, by the way, I fucking loved it. You're so
right. Oh, it's fucking best. It was so good. I loved it.
But we can only have one Sekiro. Like, I really think it's going to be interesting to see which of these games is the one that really like ends up on because there's like 5 of them.
I missed what did you say Indiana Jones?
No one has mentioned Indiana.
We've not said that yet. That looks amazing. Troy is killing it, by the way.
Because I was like, does Harrison Ford get a check? But not for this. How do they split up that character?
Ford will 100% get a check for the likeness, I would assume.
Yeah.
And I would hope Troy's getting a good check for the voice as well. Yeah, it would be split between them. But those deals are normally separated, right? So like that makes sense though. But yeah, it's worth calling out on the show. Like, Troy is killing it. Like, I've been a fan of his approach. Like, I remember when the first one came out, me and Troy we talked a bit about it, and kind of he expressed like that it was kind of, he wasn't trying to do an impression, he was trying to interpret and do something, do an Indiana Jones rather than Harrison Ford. I just think he's nailing it. I think he's absolutely killing it. It's a great performance. It's really exciting to hear to hear more of that, and just the tone of the cinematics and stuff. I saw someone on Twitter say it looks like they got Spielberg to direct the cinematics, and it does have that energy. It's great.
Nobody makes fun of Nazis better than Machine Games.
Hell yeah.
That's never not fun. And like, I just replayed the cutscene recently where you meet Hitler as BJ Blazkowicz in the second time.
Dude, that is one of the most amazing scenes in all of gaming history.
It's so fucking good. I forgot that he has the shit written on his hand, like his lines written, and he's pretending to be himself. It's so fucking good. Everything about it is so good. Like,
the idea, it's amazing that it made me realize I had never seen anybody try to imagine what an aging kind of like dementia-ridden Hitler would be like, and that scene was because I thought the first Wolfenstein was such a masterpiece that the second one was like a victim of the success of the first. But that one scene, the whole Venus set piece was just so standout,
so good, and it made me really excited for Indiana Jones because I was like, oh yeah, it's Nazis. Oh yeah, Machine Games is really good at making fun of fucking Nazis. Like, it's, you know, the vibe's obviously very different, but BJ's still pretty adventurous. Like, they are really the perfect studio to make it. It was such a good choice. And I've seen a lot of people like have issues with it being first person for some reason. Like, I guess they want to see indie.
I do.
You do?
Yeah, I do. I never think, when I think indie, I guess growing up on the indie games, I always think third person. Third person also is like more world showy.
Yeah, it's more action adventure.
If you're in ancient Egypt or you're looking at the Sphinx, I always picture it being in a third person perspective, not through
I think I just trust that. That team's very good at that. You know, I trust them.
I think also my brain's imprint. It's like, you know how things inspire things. It's like, Uncharted is clearly inspired by indie. But
I was going to say, like, I feel like I have Uncharted. I like the idea of this feeling different, but I totally get where you're coming from. That would be the... Yeah. If Uncharted didn't exist, 100% I'd be up for this.
I land where you do on this one also, Alana, insofar as Machine Games have proven themselves so deeply with first person that it's kind of like...
Let them do
just stay the course on your core strengths, and you know, we can hope for the best.
Yeah. I was gonna give a shout out to the Blumhouse games reveals.
So smart, fucking smart.
And also to Outer Sloth. Those were the two things that I was like, fuck yeah. So the Blumhouse games is like a bunch of indie horror games that Blumhouse is publishing. They all look very, very distinct.
I saw Sam Barlow was in that mix. Did I see that correctly?
Yep, yeah, he's doing one there.
And then Outer Sloth is Inner Sloth, who made Among Us, publishing indie games that they like now, which I think that's such a good team to do it because they failed and succeeded. Like when Among Us first came out, it was not a success, so they have that perspective, and then they have the perspective of a hugely successful game and how to support it in long term.
They also have infrastructure, which is the big one. Like, because a lot of us indies who've had kind of a game or a couple of games that have like blown up. Because the thing is, the problem with making a lot of money is what do we do with this money? And some choose to get sports cars, but like most want to make more games. So, like, for example, we've definitely done, like, investments into other people's games, but we're not a publisher. We haven't got the infrastructure to kind of support, like, a release. So ours has always been we've been able to, like, do dev funding, but basically not ever be a publisher, quote unquote, because we're just not, we'd be shit at it, basically. And what's clever about Innersloth is because they had to build that infrastructure because their game did so big and such a broad audience as well, they've kind of sideways their way into that process. And then the Blumhouse thing I just think is so clever because they're not doing the obvious thing, the lazy thing of like, let's do tie-in games to our horror movies. They're generating new IP, which I think is the next interesting step in the licensed game and kind of film industry intersecting with games space. Is enough movies based on games have done well that I could absolutely see people starting to make film companies wanting to make games in the same way as, you know, Disney makes comics, right? To start creating IP that can then go, and that's why I see with Blumhouse is like, they'll make those indie games, and I'm sure the goal is that all those indie games will make money and the developers will get to make great games and do future stuff. But they'll also be paying attention to which ones really click, and then they're first in there with the adaptation straight away. I think it's a really smart way. I don't think they'll be the last to do that. Yeah, everyone's going to copy them, I think. Yeah.
Isn't that kind of fundamentally similar to the premise of Annapurna, though? Like, because it's not like they're doing all tie-ins of Annapurna films, but
I feel like Annapurna. I might be wrong. I feel like Annapurna. I get the impression.
But they were
I get the impression
company first.
Yeah.
But I think Annapurna are trying to... I guess that's the difference. And to be clear, I've not talked to any of these guys. I know this might be bollocks. I feel like Blumhouse are the genius of Blumhouse in the film space is they're very good on the we spend a small amount of money. They're making money. They are definitely like there to get paid. So they spend a small amount of money on horror movies, which are the most reliable way to make money on low budget movies. With Annapurna, I think the difference is Annapurna I see doing games that are independent and original IP. I see them doing that because they want to make interesting, quirky, cool stuff and win awards. I see Blumhouse doing, I'm like, they're here to make money, and I can see the path they're going to use to take that. That's the difference. I'm making big assumptions there.
No, but I also don't know if that's correct, but that feels deeply plausible. Because you're right.
Either way, they're both they're both doing well at what they do, for sure.
Well, but Blumhouse is definitely intrinsically far more commercial in its conception.
Yeah. And unabashedly so, right? I don't think they've ever pretended otherwise. Like they are. It's what's the name of the? I don't think that's a
dirty word either. Like I don't think.
Not at all. No. What was the horror producer that died recently? Fuck. What's his name? Famous. Basically, gave James Cameron his
Roger
star.
Corman.
Roger Corman. I see Blumhouse as the natural next. It's the Roger Corman trick. Find talented people, get them to make the cheapest movies possible with a couple of jump scares in, so you can get a teenage crowd to come and pay you lots of money to see it, and repeat. And you get them while they're young and cheap and talented, and start careers, and it's just mutually beneficial for everyone. I see that. That feels like Blumhouse have kind of taken that and industrialized that idea a little bit. So I'm interested to see what they do in games. I think they'll be disruptive. Say again, sorry.
I said I look forward to seeing where it goes. So it was a great start there. Super exciting.
Sorry, I just kind of walked all over your one there. I apologise. I got excited. I think it's cool.
You're okay.
Well, I said Doom
looks awesome.
My big one for me. I just love that. Yeah. I love that. It's video game heritage. My earliest memories is Doom 93. So it's always. I feel like video game heritage is Gears. It does feel good to know that there's a Gears entry on the way at some point. It's just nice to be in a world where there's a new Gears game.
Mm-hmm.
They took the moody version of the pop song and did a moody cover of the moody cover of the pop song.
The one is, I don't know if you know, Mike, I would assume you do, but is iconic from the Gears 2 trailer. So it was originally in the Gears 2 trailer. They call it the Mad World trailer. That had that song.
Was it 2 or 1?
It might have been
I thought it was
1.
one. He's running down the
slower.
street, isn't he, with the one? I think it's with the. I think it was one. I
It
think
was the
Mad
one where you
World was
see
one.
all the like
I.
the ashes. People. Well, maybe it wasn't.
No, it's
Whatever.
Marcus
I learned that
and
song
then
on.
he stands
He's
in
running
front of
alone
it.
down like a street, and then you see the lights, the eyes light up, and
Yeah,
it's this
yeah,
big thing
yeah.
in front.
Oh, yeah,
It was
that
like
does
the
sound right.
initial. I think it was the
Yeah, they
initial
basically
reveal,
just
and then this
rolled
one
that
did
back.
Mad World, but like even slower and even
Yeah.
moodier, which I
Even
liked.
moodier.
That's amazing.
I
So
read all
good.
those books and I read the comics. I'm a huge Gears fan, and there was a period of time where I was a child and I wanted to get St. Jacinto tattooed on me, which is the city. Jacinto is the one that Ide came from, and it's this whole thing where I'm super excited about that game. Like it's, yeah, I was like kind of
I can't
didn't
wait.
need more Gears, and now I'm like they're making a prequel.
Yeah.
Even though this
And it's
technically
amazing
separate
they've
song.
not.
There was-
That bit of lore is so interesting. It's wild they've not mined it yet. It's weird that that's
all
still
through the
virgin
comics.
soil, basically. It's amazing. Yeah.
I know you guys are talking about indie and stuff, but like I saw something that I thought was super cool for a AAA franchise, like so Black Ops, right? Call of Duty. There's something I just saw the other day. They finally have more than 4 hit animations, so where you get shot. Like even GoldenEye had, I think, probably more than that, right? Like you could shoot your hand. They finally are like, okay, so now the animate, like your enemies will react depending on where you hit them. We have multiple.
Didn't know they didn't already.
Yeah, so now if there is a difference between shooting someone in the hand versus
That's
just
cool.
like the 4 dead animations.
Yeah, we'll take it.
And for something like that, that's been doing the same thing for so long. I thought that was like, I know I'm clutching at straws, but I just thought, oh, that's cool.
You're allowed to be
Boy,
excited
isn't
about
that
whatever you're
a,
excited about.
That's a pretty powerful reminder. Like when someone's like, we must have this feature in or our game will fail. And if Call of Duty 20 years in is going, hey, we finally got this feature, and it's a pretty good reminder that maybe the game can be successful for other reasons.
Yeah.
Like
True.
learn, because I'm so guilty of that sometimes where I'm like, no, if I don't have those 3 extra trumpets, the whole thing is, like it's really easy to kind of get in your own head about something that feels so close and you must have it a certain way. And yeah, it's like that old story with Neil deGrasse Tyson giving shit to James Cameron for having the wrong Starry Night Sky when they're lying on the thing, and Cameron goes, imagine how much money Titanic could have made if we'd had accurate stars.
So good.
deGrasse Tyson felt very put in his place by that comment.
This
All
was
right.
much. Listen, everybody. I'm on a video game writer. That's awesome. Wizard video game professor. That's RAHUL. KOHLI. He's an actor. That is Mike Bickle. He's a video game director. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
All right.